Welcome to Wayward Writers. My name is Heather Cashman,
And I'm Stephanie Bearce.
and we're here today with author and editor at Shadow Mountain, Lisa Mangum, and we're very excited to have her. Stephanie, will you tell us a bit more about her?
I would love to. Lisa has worked in publishing since 1997. She's been the managing editor for Shadow Mountain since 2014 and has worked in several New York Times bestselling authors. While fiction is her first love, she also has experience working with nonfiction projects. Lisa is also the author of 4 national best-selling YA novels, several short stories, and novellas. She's also got a fiction book about the craft of writing based on the TV show Supernatural, which I love Supernatural too, Lisa. So she's edited several anthologies about various magical creatures, pirates, and food for Woodfire Press. She regularly teaches at writing conferences, including hosting a writing weekend in Capitol Reef National Park through UVU. She lives in Taylorsville, Utah with her husband, Tracy. And welcome, Lisa. I am so excited to get to talk to you today.
Thank you.
I'm very excited about your new book. Can you tell us the title of it?
Sure. It's my first nonfiction publication, and it's called Write Fearless, Edit Smart, Get Published, a masterclass for fiction writers.
Okay.
And
This is exciting.
It's so much fun.
I bet. So tell me, what do you mean when you say write fearless?
So, writing fearless is a way to put yourself in a space where you write with abandon, where that first draft just can come pouring out without expectation, without fear, without judgment, so that those words can just come land on the page so that you have something to work with during editing and then further down the track. And so it was a way to encourage people to take the power back, to be bold and be confident in the fact that their first draft does not have to be perfect. It just has to exist. And one of the reasons why I like that word is the reminder of taking it as 2 parts, to fear less about what people might think about your story, or about your draft. Fear less about needing to get it right the first time. Fear less when you sit down and think, oh, I don't even know what I'm doing. That once you can do that, when you can fear less, then eventually you can write fearless. And so that's where I wanted to start with. For I think a lot of writers, they have a really good idea and they're excited about it, and then they look at those blank pages and think, how in the world am I supposed to get that idea that I love? I don't even know where to start. And so my book walks you through the whole process, really, of getting an idea and developing it, building characters, putting relationships together, adding conflict, and then getting through writer's block and some encouragement about voice and how to best present your story. It's ready for other people to read it.
I'm
That's
ready. I need
cool.
that book right now.
I know. I already need it. And it's not coming out until January, right?
Yeah, it'll be out in January,
Okay.
which I'm very excited about. So that new year,
That's awesome.
you're getting started. You've made your New Year's resolution. This is the year I'm going to write a book. And hopefully my guide can help you reach that goal.
I really do
Yeah.
like the part about writing fearless, because I think anyone who's sat down and tried to face that blank page, that can be overwhelming. Even if you've done it before, even if you've
Yeah.
successfully published books before, that blank page sometimes stops you before you even get any farther.
So I'm actually trying out right now for an IP project, and it is very interesting because it came with a big synopsis outline. And when you say write fearless, like, I continually am throughout the process, I have the outline right before me, and I have this constant fear that I'm not writing the characters true to what they should be, or there's a lot of world building that's going into the sample. So I'm trying to world build the whole book in one thing. So I'm constantly being tripped up by like all these little minutia types
Yeah.
of things that I want to include in this first draft. And so the idea of just writing without any fear at all, writing with abandon, right? I love that idea. So Do you think that writing with an outline is a good idea, or do you think that we should just let it go?
Let it flow. I personally love writing with outlines. I'm very much an outline person, writing my novels and even writing this nonfiction book. I personally do better with some good structure. But I have friends who just plant a few guideposts and then go exploring and figure out the story along the way. I think both ways can work. I think both ways are right, as long as both ways get you to the end result, which is having a finished manuscript. I think most authors fall in the general in between those two extremes where they have a general idea of where they want to go, and then they are aiming for the midpoint or aiming for a plot point or aiming for the climactic ending, and then they explore and play. And I think that is when writing is the most fun, where you can be brave and fearless as you follow your characters off the beaten path a little bit. Because sometimes if you try to stick too closely to your outline, you miss
Right.
the opportunity for some really interesting development and interesting side detours of where the story really wants to go, which you didn't know at the beginning. When you're just very first sitting down and outlining start to finish, you could get there, but you may end up missing a lot of real fun scenic vistas along the way if you
Mm-hmm.
hold yourself too regimented to this is the outline and it has to be this way. The outline, I think, is just a good springboard to get your brain working and thinking and priming the pump of looking at the story as a whole. And then once you get in there to be, like I said, be fearless to follow your characters and hear what they're saying and see how the relationships are developing and being surprised at the shape the story takes along the way.
Sounds to me like you're advocating for us to go back and play a little bit more when we're writing.
I think
Yeah.
so. My brother is currently writing a novel right now, and he is having the time of his life because he is just playing. Like, he has no expectation of needing to get done by a deadline or worrying about if this is going to get published or be on the New York Times bestseller. Like, he just wants to play with these characters and write these scenes that he's has had in his head for months, and watching him and helping him really has reignited this idea, I think, of creativity is fun and
Yeah.
writing is fun. And sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because it's got to be perfect and it's got to be done and it's got to be published and it's got to win awards and it's got to be something. And if we can just pull back to that center idea of what got us excited about this in the first place, and usually it is a fun scene that we wanted to describe or a character that is really sassy and sarcastic and we want to write their dialogue, and, or there's a fight scene that we want to just explore. And I really like that idea of returning to some fun in writing.
I do too, because I think that's true. We start out because it's fun and we enjoy it. And it's so much fun creating a world and the people and everything. And then we get too wrapped up in the business aspect of it. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we lose that joy. So I love the idea of writing fearless. But there still comes the point that we have to talk to other people about it.
Yes.
And that's where we come to the editing smart, right?
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important to really enjoy the creative process, because eventually you have to take that hat off and put on the
Mm-hmm.
editing hat. And eventually, then you have to put on the business hat for the
Hmm.
publishing. And when it comes to the editing part, what I advocate is to really treat that as a separate step entirely. Because if you try to edit too much when you're writing, then you end up sort of writing and revising and reworking the same couple of chapters over and over, and you never move forward with your story. And you can accidentally get caught in that loop of,
Hmm.
I've let me change this. Oh, now that changes all these other things. And oh, now doesn't work, and now what do I do? And I should probably just give up and not write this story. And I don't want people to do that. So the edit smart part of my book, I talk about the difference between developmental editing and copy editing, and when in the process you should do both of those tasks and treat them separately. The developmental edit being that 30,000-foot view up above. How's the structure? How's the flow? How's my pacing? And then the copy editing dropping down into the nuts and bolts of word choice, grammar, punctuation, spelling, finding those missing words. They both have their place and they both have their strengths, but they also both are very separate steps, and they are very separate from the creative process of writing. And so it is part of knowing when to employ those skills and when to hold them back.
I really like the idea of this whole concept of writing the whole thing, having fun, letting your creative side shine, and then going back and changing your hats, because I have seen so many people who have critique groups and they write a chapter and then they take it to their critique group and their critique group tears it apart and then they go back and they rewrite the first chapter, but nothing else is written. And so many times I see people stuck. They're just stuck in the first 2, 3, 5 chapters. And I always tell people, I really feel like you should just never show any part of your novel to anyone until it's done, until the first draft at least is finished. And then if you want to go chapter by chapter, fine. But to me, how can you really ever do a proper developmental edit until
All the
you've...
way to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And how can anyone else really know what your first chapter should even be or where your book should even start if they haven't read the end of it?
Yes,
So,
I totally agree. I think because your first chapter might change dramatically depending on
yeah,
where you actually end up, because when you last chapter you may want to go back and say, oh, now that I know, I want to plant some more foreshadowing seeds here, or
exactly.
this character actually didn't turn out to be very important, so I can downplay the appearance in the first couple of chapters of this person and make adjustments as a whole when it's all done. I do think there's some value in having a critique group help during the process. They can be great brainstorming places,
Yeah,
springboards, figuring out I'm stuck in a problem and I can't figure out which way to go. Those things can be really
yeah,
helpful to talk about with other writers and with a critique group. But for a true developmental edit, you do want to wait till you've gone all the way to the end of the row and then can look back and say, okay, what do I really have? How do I want to shape it? Where is it strong? Where is it weak? And what can I do to take it to the next level?
yeah. And that first chapter is a promise.
Mm-hmm.
So if you aren't delivering on the promise, then, you know, you've gotten it wrong.
Yeah. And your readers will tell you if you've got it wrong.
Yes, they will. And hopefully your critique partners will tell you too.
Yes.
I agree. And I think that's really great advice for anyone, especially people who are starting out, because I see that so often with newer writers that they get stuck on the first 3 chapters and just never move forward because they get too much input. I like that. I like the idea of doing the whole thing. And of course, I think it does depend on how well you know your critique partners and how well you
Mm-hmm.
know yourself too in critiquing. What are some of the things that you wish that writers would think about in their own editing process when they go back in and look at it? What do you see that maybe we authors need to pay more attention to?
One thing I would love to see, that I do love to see when manuscripts come in from authors, are stories that have a really strong sense of voice from a character perspective or from an author perspective. That's one of the things that really makes a manuscript stand out from the many submissions that I get. And so I would love it during developmental edits or during that revision process if authors could go back and do a voice pass. Like, Now that I've written my first draft and I know my characters better, let me go back through and really strengthen their individual voices, their individual personalities, because that above anything else is one of the things that will elevate your book to catch an eye, to catch an editor's eye. I think the smaller things, if you've got missing words or typos or some stray commas here and there, those are not deal breakers. And when I look at a manuscript, we can fix those. That's fine. I look for how strong is the plot, how amazing are the characters, how realistic are they, how marketable and unique is the idea. And those are the things that I would love for authors to look through those lenses when they do revision passes and rewrites to say, can I really hone in on my pitch with a really unique marketing angle? Have I really elevated my characters? Have I really made sure my plot is tight as a drum, start to finish?
So, Lisa, you have edited loads and loads of wonderful authors. And what do you think that authors should do if they don't like the editorial advice that they're getting from their editors or their critique partners?
I have edited a lot of books and I have been edited as well, which has made me a more compassionate editor, if I'm being honest. And I think the first and most important thing to remember is that there's a difference in editorial feedback between what is a must do because it's a rule and what is an opinion. And the things that are rules are the way you spell words because the dictionary says so, how you use, the grammar rules, where capitalization happens, rules that are from the Chicago Manual of Style or from your in-house style guide or the dictionary. Those are established, like you should do those. The other things that are opinions and suggestions, those you have to weigh and say, do they make sense for my story? And you, as the author, you're the boss of your story, not the editor. The editor, my job as the editor, is to help you and to support you as the author. My job is to help clean up behind the scenes. My job is to help polish and shine and to make suggestions that hopefully will strengthen and improve your story or your characters. But if there's ever editorial feedback that an author gets that just doesn't sit right, that just doesn't, you don't see how it is going to make things better, you totally have the right to discard that and stick to your guns and say, actually, this I want to do this. Having said that, I think it's also important for authors, once they've made that decision, to ask themselves, is there a third solution? Usually, an editor has identified something or made a suggestion or implemented a rule because there's a problem, something that doesn't quite connect. Now, it may be that the problem doesn't actually exist where that edit was made. Perhaps the problem actually exists 2 or 3 chapters earlier, and the editor is only now saying, wait, I don't understand what's happening here. This feels like it's wrong. When in reality, what you need to go back 2 or 3 chapters and say, oh, yeah, this is actually where the problem is. I need to fix it here. It may also be that the editor's made a suggestion that doesn't quite sit right, and but you also know that, yeah, maybe there is something wrong, and having a third solution, a third alternative, could satisfy you both. And that's what being a team really means with being an author and an editor. And I, as your editor, am on your team. I'm on your side. I'm here to help. I'm here to do what's best for you and what's best for the book. I really do my best to not just make random suggestions or random edits because that's the way I would do it. That's not a good enough reason for me to change something. But if it's, I don't understand why this is working, why you have this, here's something that I think might provide clarity or streamline the prose, tighten things up, those I would be able to say, here's why I did it. And hopefully then the author can say, oh, yeah, okay, I can see that. And that does improve the book. So I am going to make that editorial change. And then it's also doesn't hurt my feelings if a suggestion that I made isn't accepted. It does hurt my feelings if there's a rule that I implement that then the author wants to break. And then I'm like, are you sure? There's a reason we spell lasagna that way. There's only one way to spell lasagna. And so it's that balancing act between the rules and the suggestion, but it's all in service of making the book the best it can be.
I love that. And I think that when I watch my authors, my clients who are working with editors, and I see that beautiful collaborative process, and it just makes the manuscript shine. I think it's really important to be open when you go into edits, and also really know your book, know why things are there, know what you're doing and why you did the things you did, because then when you get those edits back, you can more easily find that third solution, or be open to knowing why you did something and why they're suggesting something. So I do think that's
And I,
really good advice.
and I also think that the collaboration between author and editor can really elevate the story to the next level, that maybe the author couldn't quite get there by themselves, but that extra push or that extra idea that comes from the editor really can make it shine, and it's a great collaboration.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the collaborations that you may have had and successes in working with some of your clients?
Um, yeah, I was working with an author. Her name's Elizabeth Loam, and she's writing young adult fantasy and romantasy for us. And I just finished editing a book for her that we're doing called Casters and Crowns. And in the editing process that I did with her, there were several instances where I'm like, on the one hand, I don't understand how the magic is working here. You set up the rules to be X, Y, and Z, and now it seems like we're not following them. Can you help me understand how that is going to work? And I said, perhaps one solution could be changing up the language of how the princess has been cursed by the witch, and saying if we reframe how the language of the curse is at the beginning, that might solve the problem. And so I wrote out like what I thought it should say. And she's, oh, yes, that actually works really well. So that was something that helped, where I saw a problem and offered a solution for clarity. There were also a couple places where because it's a romance, when we got to the kissing scenes, it's a slow burn romance. And I'm like, you could actually linger in this moment just a little longer. Payoff, we've come a long way for this. So feel free to write me 2 or 3 more paragraphs here about the relationship and the kiss. And so that was just another place where I could push her and sort of give her permission to say, you know what, it's okay. You can really have some more fun with this relationship because it's so crucial to the story. So that's another example of a collaboration where I could encourage her to, nothing was wrong.
Yeah.
All the words were spelled correctly. It was a great scene. But I also felt, we could turn the volume up just a little bit here.
It's fun.
It is fun.
That's fun. So, do you have any tips for authors when they're self editing? And do you think there's a point when they can over edit? And how do we know when that is?
I for sure think there's a danger of over editing. And it goes back to the same thing we talked about, that constant revision of chapter 1 that you never get past. And when you're self editing, there's a lot that you can do in terms of even just the basics of running spell check or running a grammar program to just clean up those little things for the copy editing side. I feel like if you're still building the house with your edits, if you're still adding a room because there's a new character that needs to come live in your story, or if the floorboards are really wobbly, or maybe there's a hole in the roof, those are developmental edits that you really should continue to work on. But if you're down to doing edits where you're just rearranging furniture or trying to decide if the curtains should be red or blue, if you're just doing some small fussy word choice, you're done. You're done self-editing. You're ready to move on to the next step to get it ready for submissions and getting it published, or whatever you want to do with it after that. Because once you put it into the hands of an editor at a publishing house, they're going to do another pass, and they may say, you know what, chapter 14, actually, nothing happens here. We should take it out. And they may also, for that sort of construction developmental edit, but they'll also go through and do a pass for the copy edits for grammar, spelling, and punctuation. And what I don't want authors to do is hang on to a book that's ready to submit because they're worried that their commas are in the wrong place. That is not going to be a problem. We'll fix it. We'll fix it in post, as they say in the movie industry. We can fix it down the road. What we want is to make sure it's a solid foundation, beautiful house, good roof, good foundation, comfortable places to sit, and then invite everybody to come into your story.
I love that. And I'm so glad that there is help for those of us who are comma challenged.
Yes.
I
In
somehow
my book, I
slept through
do have
that
some.
set of lessons.
In my book, I do have a couple flow charts that I build of where does my comma go, and so you can follow through and decide. Oh, yep, this sentence needs it, and oh, actually, no, this sentence does not.
Okay,
So
I'm going to have to
Awesome.
get your flow chart right
Yeah, I
away.
love that idea of a
I
flow chart. I
need
love
this.
it.
I need this so bad. This is it's all just so good. So, you say you teach some other places. Where can somebody go if they want to go and learn from you in person?
Oh, I try to go to a number of conferences. Many of them are in Utah, where I live, where we
Mhm.
have a abundance of a really strong writing community, and we have a lot of conferences. The ones that I have coming up are the ones that I go to every year. The Superstars Writing Seminar in Colorado Springs that happens every February. I always go to the Storymakers Conference in Provo, Utah, that happens every May. And I always go to the ANWA conference, which is the American Night Writers Association, and that happens in Arizona every September. Beyond that, I also fill in some other conferences, some science fiction, fantasy conferences, also some religious fiction. Um, I also go to a conference called Realm Makers that happens every July. And then twice a year, I teach at Capitol Reef through Utah Valley University. We take a weekend, we go to the national park, we stay at the field station, we spend the weekend writing together. I teach some classes and give you feedback and edit some pages for your individual stories. I also have done some Zoom classes and online presentations. And so I really like having the
Hi,
chance to
Kitty.
talk to people and talk to authors and look at their query letters or look at the first chapter and really try to help guide and steer them where they go.
I have to admit that I'm so excited that you're coming to the Realm Makers in St. Louis. I already signed up to go and listen to you. So
Oh, fabulous.
I'm
Yes, I will be
excited.
teaching
So,
a class there
yes.
and doing some pitches. So
Yeah.
we shall have to go
That's
to
fun.
lunch.
We will. I'm ready. It'll be exciting.
So, one last question. Is there anything that you wish writers knew about editors and the process of editing?
I would love it for authors to remember that editors are readers too. First and foremost, I am looking for a book as an editor to fall in love with, the same way that I, as a reader, go to the bookstore and look for a book to fall in love with. And my job as an editor is not to hurt your feelings or tear your story apart or to say, this is all of this is bad. My job is to find the story that I can fall in love with and that makes it easy for me to talk to other people about because I'll need to pitch it to the rest of the editorial team. I'll need to pitch it to sales and marketing to get it approved, to get it published. And then we obviously then want to do taglines and marketing and pitches to the customer to get your story in their hands. I really see myself as directing traffic on a bridge of getting the story from the author into the reader's hands and heart and mind. And I'm invisible in that scenario as the editor. I'm support, I'm behind the scenes, and my job is to help connect two people who want to tell a story and want to enjoy a story. So I'm totally on your side and I want to support and help that in any way I can.
I love that.
I do too.
I love that.
That's great.
I see myself as an agent, as a gladiator. I'm like, I love this thing and I'm going to just fight for it and I'm going to fight everyone for it. because
Yes.
I want it to be out there. But it's because I love it too. Like I
Hmm.
have fallen in love with the story.
I,
I know it's
I think that's important for authors to understand because we get so close to our work and we're putting it out there and it's, oh, is anybody going to like it? So when you find someone to partner with, it's just, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. And I'm going to get your book. So we can,
I will make sure you get a copy.
we will be
yeah,
passing
definitely.
on the news and get your stories out there.
Okay, so one more time, just tell us your it's write fearless, edit smart, get published.
We'll make sure that we will have all the information in the show notes of where people can order it and get their own
Yes.
Yeah,
copy. And
Yes.
Lisa, it was so
lovely.
fun to get to talk to you. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining us.
You're
I'm sure you've
welcome.
given all of our listeners some really good hints and ideas for how to conquer their path.
Thanks for the invitation. It was great to visit with you.